welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, ensuring you leave no stone unturned for all these upcoming MMA events. Now, we've added 2 new promotions for the 2025 schedule, bringing us to a total of 19 different promotions that we cover from all over the world. We have close to 4,800 fighter profiles available on there for you to browse through as well, so that you can get direct links to past fights for all these competitors and save a boatload of time if you enjoy studying up on these promotions yourself. Check out why we have over 110 subscribers as well. You get a 7-day free trial to try it out for free. Check the link in the description below. Take full advantage of a very stacked February featuring events from promotions like CFFC, A1 Combat, Fury FC, Invicta FC, LFA, ACA, Aries FC, KSW, Fury FC once again. OKTAGON is going down in February as well. Again, even when there's no UFC, there are a ton of other promotions you can bet on, and the one-stop shop for you to ensure you can get the best studying possible is through the MMA Fight Archive, link in the description below. All right. We are back for the first PFL breakdown of the year. Now, actually, this was supposed to be a Bellator Championship Series event, but as you guys know, last week, the PFL has decided to close down Bellator and just simply promote under the PFL banner, hence why this has been changed now to the PFL Road to Dubai, which I don't even understand where this road is or where it's leading to. It says to Dubai, but we've already had plenty of Dubai-based fights. So why are we going back to Dubai? I don't get it. It makes no sense to me whatsoever, but however they want to name it, they can name it. They've even named it Dagestan versus Ireland 2, kind of playing off the whole Khabib and Conor McGregor beef from several years ago. But now they got a Dagestani fighting an Irishman in the main event. So they're going to go back to the well, and they do have a couple of other Irish versus Dagestan fights on the card as well. A total of 11 fights, one of them being amateur, so I'm skipping that completely because more often than not, we don't see odds for amateur fights, so we're going to be strictly focusing on the pro fights, the 10 pro fights that we have scheduled for this card. A reminder, since there is no UFC this week, and I'm also covering KSW and LFA, KSW will simply be in the form of a written breakdown on the MMALOTN Patreon page, which you can find in the link in the description below. Otherwise, you can wait for the LFA 200. Yes, it is their bicentennial show. They have 3 title fights. That'll be going down Saturday evening. I'll have a Legacy Warriors podcast to break down that entire card for you guys, but I will have in-depth and written breakdowns and track plays for LFA also on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. That's your other one-stop shop. If you just want picks, breakdowns, and me to do all the work for you, I got you covered on the MMALOTN Patreon page. Make sure you guys check the link in the description below for that. All right, like I said, I got 10 fights to get through for you guys for this PFL Road to Dubai card. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into this bad boy. First fight up, we got Mustafa Abada Rashid Neda coming in at -170, going up against Haider Khan, who comes in at +140. Now, Neda is a guy that's been struggling to capitalize on the winning streak that he's currently on due to the inactivity that we've been seeing from him as of late. He suffered his last defeat in April of 2018, would go on to win 3 straight fights a year and a half after that, but then sat on the sidelines for about 4 years before he was scheduled to return for the PFL Challenger Series in January of 2023. Unfortunately for him, he was unable to make the 170-pound weight, even pulling out a couple days before the fight was supposed to happen, and now he's back at 185 pounds, where he's done the majority of his winning. He's a big power puncher that loves to crash the pocket, has some sketchy takedown defense and some sketchy cardio, but if he can command the pace and dictate where this fight takes place, it's often him with crashing the pocket, landing those big shots, and looking to knock his opponents out. His opponent this week in Haider Khan makes his PFL debut here, coming in as a BJJ black belt, rides a 4-fight winning streak. His lone defeat coming against former Cage Warriors champion Mick Stanton, and that's a fight where you saw Stanton utilize a superior BJJ approach and really put Khan through the ringer in that fight. Khan makes no bones about it. This guy wants to take it to the ground, get to his BJJ immediately. He looks a little bit uncomfortable in the striking realm, although when he does show a little bit of confidence there, he can throw with some solid sting and some pop which could be beneficial for him if he can build a little bit more confidence in that realm. However, he is way too hittable for me to be confident in him in this spot. If he can get this fight to the ground, things could, look really good for him, but he's going to have to go through a hell and high water to get that takedown, and I believe Neta will eventually land that big shot here to put him away. I'd much prefer the under 1.5 here to assume that we're going to get some violence, either with Khan getting that early finish with the submission or Neta eventually finding his chin and putting him away. I am going to go with Neta here. I can't justify minus 170 considering the grappling edge that Khan has, but I still believe that Neta will find that knockout shot and put him out within a round and a half. Next up, John Mitchell coming in at minus 700 going up against Suhail. Tairi coming in at plus 500. Now, Mitchell, had he had a different referee when he went up against Jakub Kashuba in the PFL 2023 Europe Championships, he probably would have won the title and may have been in a better position in his career. He had a very solid first round, hurting Kashuba very badly, and then it seemed like he fell off as Kashuba was starting to pick up the pace in round 2 and eventually find a TKO finish of his own. He did manage to bounce back in his next matchup, getting a quick victory for a Dubai-based promotion, which is actually where he has been training out of after he spent time in his native Ireland. Moving over to Dubai, but most recently going over to California and training alongside Jalen Turner for this training camp, showcasing that he wants to diversify his training as much as possible to be the best version of himself that he can be. He's a very talented fighter that utilizes a relentless grappling approach when he sees an advantage there. He likes to utilize high pace and high pressure to keep his opponents on their back foot so that he can do his best work from that position of just keeping them on their heels. And he normally seems to have a good enough gas tank to go 15 minutes if that's what's required of him. He's going up against Suhail Tairi, who we last saw in the semifinals of the PFL MENA tournament last year, and he came up short against Mohsen Mohamed Saifi in a very weird matchup. We saw Mohamed Saifi had tremendous success in the first round, butchering Tairi on the feet, and then Tairi was able to have a big moment at the ending of the second round, but luckily for Mohamed Saifi, the bell saved the day, and Tairi, who was celebrating a win, was forced to lock back in and go out there and fight a third round, which he ended up losing on the scorecards, and then ended up losing the decision as well. But Tairi, normally a striker, likes to utilize pinpoint sniper-like striking to touch his opponents up from distance. His defensive grappling leaves a lot to be desired, but he's clearly working on it in terms of working to get back to his feet or nullifying the amount of damage his opponents are able to get from that top position, just as we saw when he fought Ahmed Amir 2 fights ago. But he is a talented striker, and I would love to see how he looks when he fights in the striking realm. Now, he goes up against a very tough John Mitchell here, who will likely have the grappling advantage, and I think Mitchell can stay active enough from that top position to utilize any of the offense that Tairi is trying to get off, to use those opportunities to pass, get to more dominant positions, and then start writing down bigger shots that will cause Tairi problems. Tairi could make this very competitive in the striking if he can keep it there, which is why that plus 500 is a little bit intriguing for me. But I think Mitchell is much better than the opponents that Tairi has been facing, and I think that we'll see Mitchell utilize that advantage, specifically in the grappling realm, to keep Tairi on his back, and I think he ends up grinding this fight out and winning it on by the scorecards. But minus 700 is a little bit too wide for me. Should he not be successful in getting this fight to the ground, this will play out much closer than those odds indicate. I'll be keeping my eye on this line, as there are not many dogs that I really like on this card. Tairi kind of whispering in my ear right now. If he gets closer to that plus 700, plus 750 range, it's going to be forcing my hand there. But in terms of a straight up prediction, I'm going to go Mitchell, and Mitchell by decision. Next up, Hadi Omar Al-Hussaini coming in at minus 325, going up against Ruel Panales coming in at plus 250. Now we'll start off on the Al-Hussaini side, who is a grappler who normally puts opponents in bad positions, grinds them out, or finds submissions as well. He eventually found a submission, his last opponent was struggling with the grapple-heavy approach from Al-Hussaini, but Hussaini seemed to run out of gas late in that matchup as his opponent provided some solid offense and resistance in return, and then eventually was able to let that pay off for him in the dying seconds of this fight, finding a club and sub victory with 30 seconds left. goddamn, 36 seconds left on the clock. Getting a little bit ring rust here with no UFC on this week. I guess that's what it is. But again, Hussaini, very solid grappler. We've seen him on the mats with guys like Usman Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev, and those guys over there in Dagestan. Seems to have a very crafty jiu-jitsu game if that's what he can lean on. And that's what he's going to need to in this matchup against Filipino Ruel Panales, who we last saw on the road to UFC. He got a bye in the first round after his opponent missed weight badly and was forced to pull out of the fight. But then he went into the semifinals against Kiro Sahota, who he pretty much got swept on the scorecards by, with the exception of one judge that gave Panales the second round. But Panales was really struggling to get to his power punching style as Sahota kept him at bay, put him up against the cage and roughed him up there, and even had some solid success in the grappling realm. But I think Panales is best when he can march his opponents down and land his big shots to try to put him away. The issue with Panales is that he's been facing guys on the regional scene that have been very easy to dictate the pace against and pretty much intimidate them with the power that he's been able to put on them, and that's why he ends up getting his hand raised in most of these fights. But he's going up against a very tough grappler here, and Al Hussaini, who should do a good enough job in terms of getting him to the ground and eventually finding that dominant position to control him. He might be able to find his submission, but I think for the most part, he's going to be looking to secure positions, control those, land some pitter-patter shots, and go on to win this fight on the scorecards. Minus 325, a little bit chalky, but I believe he has that big of enough a grappling advantage here, and he should be good enough in the striking realm to avoid any of that big damage from Panales. All right, next up, Mirafsal Akhtamov coming in at minus 550, going up against Mike Thompson, who comes in at plus 400. Akhtamov in 2021 finally started fighting for some recognizable promotions. He went to the UAE Warriors promotion where he went 2-0, getting a knockout victory and a split decision win before moving to the LFA in 2023 and 2024, where he was able to knock out his opponents in 72 seconds and 53 seconds respectively. Finished them. I believe he knocked one of them out and then submitted the other in 53 seconds. It's clear he has big power in his hands and he has a slick submission game he can follow up with if he needs to, but it's all about crashing the pocket and landing those big shots to put his opponents out. What I found funny in his last matchup under the LFA banner was once he finished his opponents, he did this whole looking at his watch, phone thing, looking right at the camera, looking very aggressive and looking like he means business. And he says, "Let's go, UFC, call me." And unfortunately, now here he is fighting for the PFL. It is what it is. That's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. But at least he's going to make the most of this opportunity, as this fight is actually taking place where he normally trains out of in Dubai, or close to where he trains out of in Dubai. And so maybe it's an opportunity for him to perform in front of some of his friends and family. His opponent, Mike Thompson, might be the Jordan Wright of the UK MMA scene. This guy is a serious can crusher. A combined record of his opponents at the time of fighting them was 23-52, with only one of them having a winning record, which was his last opponent, who I believe was 5-3. But he goes out there, puts his big power on them, and then eventually puts them away. But if he can't find that knockout shot early, he ends up getting grinded out or finished himself. Akhtamov should have this guy covered completely. I think we'll see him crash the pocket, land those big shots against Thompson, and eventually put him away, or look to take him to the ground and utilize his superior grappling game, where I think Thompson is very much going to struggle in this matchup. Thompson, in my opinion, is being brought in to do a job in this matchup, and I think Akhtamov will make the most of that opportunity and put him away quickly. Under 1.5 seems like a surefire spot, and I do believe Akhtamov, even at minus 550, is worth a shot in terms of putting into a parlay. Next up, Suleiman coming in at plus 180, going up against Sami, coming in at minus 220. We'll start off on the Suleiman side, whose tape was very hard to watch because of how mediocre he is. He's a fighter that has almost no striking, looks to crash the pocket immediately, looking to get opponents to the ground with desperation takedowns, has some, mediocre control. He's been able to finish some opponents in the past, but it seems with him coming up there in age, he's 35 now, he's probably starting to slow down a little bit. Very slow in the striking round, very hittable. He can be out grappled as well, which is hilarious to see, considering that's usually the approach that he looks to take against his opponents. he's just not that good, and he hasn't been all that active as of late either. This will only be his second fight since mid-2022. Now, he's going up against Sami, who seems to be a better version of Tairi Suleiman. He's a guy that likes to go out there, grapple his opponents, dominate them from that top position, is a little bit more mobile in the striking realm where he can actually land some combinations and some head kicks, but he does his best work on the mat where he's able to overwhelm his opponents and put them away. He actually has 2 wins over a PFL MENA tournament winner in Omar El Dafraoui, but he also has a victory over Yusri Belgaroui from earlier in his career, a guy that recently fought on the Contender series, and even though he won, was denied a UFC contract. And that was actually the last loss for Sami as well, as he rematched him last year and came up short in a 5-round matchup where he could not get to his grappling, considering the improvements that Belgaroui had made in that aspect of his game. Sami is still 30 years old and has a good enough wrestling game here to dominate Tairi Suleiman, and I think he also has a cardio edge here that he can push a high enough pace that Suleiman will very much struggle to get to his style, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Sami wear Suleiman down and eventually finish him in the second or third round. I do not mind the chalk in this spot either. Next up, Rinat Khavalov coming in at -750, going up against Claver Fernandes coming in at +850. Now we'll start off on the Khavalov side, who's making his PFL debut, who is looking to get a little bit more active after 1.5 years away from action. He brings in an 8-0 record to the cage, to the biggest stage he's actually fought since doing some good work against some stiff competition on the regional scene. Half of his pro wins are actually against undefeated fighters, while the combined record of all 8 of his opponents at the time of fighting them is a miraculous 56-14. Of those 14 defeats, only one of those fighters had 7 of those losses, so you can take what you want from that as well. But regardless, Khavalov is a guy that likes to utilize a relentless wrestling game, putting opponents through the ringer so he can find a position to muster up a barrage of shots and finish his opponents, where he's finished 6 of his 8 victories. He's going up against Claver Fernandes, who makes his PFL debut here, riding an 8-fight winning streak, and also is a former Chuto Brazil champion. It seems like he's moved to Dubai, and he actually won a fight under the Centurion FC promotion back in May 2023 and has been inactive ever since. He is a BJJ black belt under Andre Pederneiras, the same coach as Jose Aldo and the head coach of the Nova União camp, but it seems like since moving to Dubai, he's turned his attention to a completely different team. He has some decent leg kicks, some good grappling as you would expect, but it's obvious that whenever we see promotions like this putting Russians against Brazilians, it's often the Russians that come out on top because of their ability to wrestle their opponents, and their Brazilians being a little bit too comfortable off their back, thinking they can catch the Russians, but it's clear the Russians do enough work in terms of their submission defense that they can maintain those top positions and grind their opponents out. I expect the same thing here from Khavalov at -1750. A little bit too wide, but the line that kind of caught my eye was the over 1.5. I think that Khavalov might struggle in terms of getting to a dominant enough position to actually work to a finish, which is why I believe this might leak into the second, third, and maybe even go to the scorecards. So to get the over 1.5 at near pick 'em odds here, I think is worth a shot, and look for Khavalov to go out there and put on that Russian grinding pace to get his hand raised on the scorecards. Next up, Ibragimov coming in at -550, going up against Kenny Mokhonana coming in at +400. Now, starting off on the -550 Ibragimov side, he is an 8-0 prospect who was born in Dagestan, but actually calls Manchester top team his home. He has been training there for a very long time, but still utilizes the same Dagestani wrestling approach you would expect from fighters out of that region. He does a great job in terms of controlling his opponents on the ground, looking for finishing opportunities, and smashing opponents from that top position or locking up submission victories as well. He went 7-0 as an amateur, now 8-0 as a pro, and even though he did spend the majority of his career over there at Manchester top team, he seemed to switch it up for this camp and actually trained over there in Dagestan with the Nurmagomedov crew, considering the amount of guys that were preparing for a matchup. Obviously, Makhachev, Usman Nurmagomedov, who headlines this card. So it makes sense why he wants to try to peak around the same time as these guys. A very solid fighter. His striking is obviously improving as well, but he does such a good job in terms of looking for his openings, for his takedowns, getting to them, and then doing what he does best from that top position. He goes up against Kenny Mokhonana, who trains out of SPG Ireland. So this is in Part A, Dagestan versus Ireland matchup as well. Mokhonana suffered his first pro loss last time around as he came up short against Josh O'Connor, who put him through the ringer with a grapple-heavy approach and beat him on the scorecards. Josh O'Connor is not a prospect to overlook either, who just recently won the Aries FC title this past weekend and now holds a 9-0 record. But Mokhonana is a long, lanky, slick striker who also has some solid submission skills as well. He often looks to take opponents to the ground and try to get the best of them there if he can't get them out of there with the slick striking and power that he normally brings to the table. Unfortunately for Mokhonana, he's going up against a very tough stylistic matchup here, and credit to him for even accepting this matchup considering the disadvantages he'll have in this fight. I believe we'll see Ibragimov do a good enough job in terms of grinding Mokhonana out. I don't know if he finishes him. I think Mokhonana is very tough to put away, hence why we'll see Ibragimov continuously get those dominant positions he needs. Might get a couple submission attempts off, but I'd be surprised if he actually ends up getting the finish here. So I'm going to go Ibragimov by decision at minus 550. I believe he's worthy of being a parlay piece considering the type of advantages he has in this matchup. Next up, Magomedov coming in at minus 270, going up against Nathan Kelly, who comes in at plus 210. Now, I'll start off on the Magomedov side, who's going to be stepping into the cage for the first time in 2 years. Last time around, we saw him pick up his first loss at the hands of veteran Henry Corrales, who was able to stop his takedowns and batter him on the feet. Magomedov is a guy, obviously, Magomedov, you would expect a relentless wrestling approach from him, but he's slowly working on his striking game so that he can mask his takedowns a little bit better and manage his gas tank even better than that. Obviously, he throws with a lot of big, powerful hooks, but the point in his offense is often to get opponents to the ground and grind them out, maybe land some big shots from that top position, but is often a guy that likes to go to the scorecards to get his wins. He's 28 years old, coming off a very long layoff, but I expect him to go out there and still look as good as we've seen in the past, and possibly learn a big enough lesson in that loss to Corrales last time around that we might see even better work from him coming into this fight. He goes up against Nathan Kelly, who's actually not that bad of a fighter. Kelly dropped his first 2 ever professional fights and has now won 11 straight matchups. 7 of his last 8 fights have taken under the PFL banners, and only one of them, finishing all but one of them. He is a guy that likes to utilize a relentless grappling approach, similar to what his opponent likes to do, taking opponents down, smashing them from that top position, and looking for finishes. Luckily for him, he's been going up against some very mediocre level of competition. That's why he's been able to look so good, and he has been a lock of the night play for me in the past, but that's because of the type of skill discrepancy we've seen in his matchups. Now, this is a type of fight where we'll see what his actual ceiling is. We've seen him take him down. We've seen him controlled even in some of his fights where he's ended up winning. But now he's going up against the toughest matchup that he's ever had in his entire MMA career, and I just don't think he's up to snuff in terms of the type of grappling he's going to be facing here. Even if Magomedov can't complete the takedowns, I think the constant threat of the takedowns and even wrapping up Kelly in the clinch, pushing him against the cage and wearing him down there might be enough for Magomedov to get a victory in his return to the cage. Hence why I'm going to lean with Magomedov here. Maybe parlay worthy at minus 270. Obviously, Kelly is a very promising prospect as well. And like I said earlier, this will be a fight to truly see where his ceiling is. But I don't think that this is a test he ends up passing. I like Magomedov here. The only thing that's keeping me from going harder on him is the layoff and potential recovery issues he may have had. But if this goes with him even looking 90% of what we've seen in the past, he should do enough to grind out Kelly and win this fight on the scorecards. Co-main event time as we have former light heavyweight champion for Bellator, Vadim Nemkov, coming in at minus 2,000, going up against Tim Johnson, who comes in at minus 1,000. Now, last time around, Vadim Nemkov actually made his heavyweight debut for the PFL banner, which now just PFL, and he looked damn good. He tacked on about 35 pounds. The previous light heavyweight fight, he weighed in at 203 pounds, weighed in at 238 against Bruno Capoloza back in February of last year, and he looked like a heavyweight. So I don't hate this move for him, considering how he's managed to put the weight on. Very strong, very powerful, can still get his takedowns, can still dominate, and can even find finishes against these much bigger opponents that he's been going up against, just as he showed against Capoloza. He's 32 years old, which is a good sign for heavyweights. That's usually the prime for them, and this seems like a spot that Nemkov can go out there and put on a statement maybe even enter his name into the tournament that probably starts in April, I believe, and maybe try to get that heavyweight championship title for PFL. Good striking, and very good grappling, and very good fight IQ, as we've seen over the course of his career. He goes up against Tim Johnson, who seems to kind of be not bullied into taking this matchup, but almost forced into it, considering that this is the third opponent that Nemkov is going to be scheduled against for this matchup. Johnson, big, burly wrestler, a little bit old. Now he's obviously 40 years old, closing in on 40 years old, I should say. Getting slower. His durability is taking a little bit of a hit. Obviously, if he lands a big shot on you, he's going to cause a lot of problems for his opponents, but it seems like he's kind of just doing a job going into this matchup. I'd be surprised if Nemkov is not able to put him away within 5 minutes. I think the under 1.5 is a good way to approach this matchup. I think we see Nemkov consistently close the pocket, utilize his speed and power advantage to land some big shots on Johnson, maybe take him to the ground and get into a dominant position, but I think Nemkov just absolutely mauls Tim Johnson in the spot and finishes him in the first round. Again, under 1.5, not too shabby here. All right, main event time, where we have the Bellator, I guess it might be the PFL lightweight title now. Usman Nurmagomedov coming in at -405, going up against Paul Hughes, who comes in at +305. Now, Usman, unfortunately, had to witness his brother lose out on a title shot last week, I should say, as he came up short against Merab Dvalishvili, and now he hopes to make things right by going on and putting on a statement against a very tough Irish threat. Now, Usman Nurmagomedov may end up going down as the best Nurmagomedov to ever do it, considering his ability to strike, which was his initial martial art that he learned, and then obviously coming up in Dagestan, coming up under the Nurmagomedov name, you would expect him to round out his wrestling well enough to complement his striking, and that's exactly what he's been able to do. He's very slick and fast with his jab straight down the pipe, which was a big reason as to why he won his last matchup against Alexander Shabli, and I think that was his toughest matchup in PFLator, I keep calling it. And now we'll kind of see him just wipe out the rest of the division and eventually make his way over to the UFC, considering he's only 26 years old. Good striking, amazing grappling, very good cardio, great fight IQ. He's one of the best, if not the best fighter under the banner right now. He goes up against Paul Hughes, who I believe is taking a little bit too big of a jump up in competition. Now, his last win over AJ McKee was impressive. I don't know what judge scored that fight for AJ McKee, but it's obvious that fight should have been a clear Paul Hughes victory. He is a very slick striker. His takedown defense and grappling defense looked very good, allowing him to keep the fight in a standing position where he was clearly the better striker and was able to land much more impactful damage to end up winning that fight on the scorecards. He's one of the more well-rounded fighters we've ever seen. And like I said, he knows when to throw with hands, knows how many punches to throw, how many kicks to throw as well. And then his grappling is not too shabby either. We know that he can use his grappling defensively so that he can keep fights in the upright position and land more damage against his opponents, just as we saw in the AJ McKee fight. But I believe that this is a little bit too much for him. I wholeheartedly believe in him, right? I bet him against AJ McKee last time around. I believe he is one of the, a future of the sport, but this might be a little bit too big of a jump up for him. I would have loved to seen him fight somewhere like Alexander Shabli before getting a title shot like this, but considering the scheduling and Usman trying to look for a fight, this seemed like the next best contender for Usman. But I think Hughes can make this a little bit more competitive than the odds indicate. My issue is I think Nurmagomedov will actually get more control time than we saw AJ McKee accrue, and that will keep Hughes away from getting the amount of damage he was able to land on McKee to try to swing rounds back in his favor. I think Nurmagomedov is very good in terms of just countering effectively here, and I think he'll be able to open up takedown opportunities and control positions for long periods of time, which will eventually lead to him winning this fight on the scorecards. The over 4.5 sits around -220, which I don't really want too much of a part of, as I think that Paul Hughes can create a war if he needs to, and that could work against him or in his favor. So that's why I'm kind of staying away from the total here. But I like Usman here. I don't want to bet on it. I don't want to bet on him as a big favorite because Hughes might be able to surprise us here, but I think Usman is just the best fighter in that organization, and I think it showcases once again this weekend. So give me Usman Nurmagomedov to win this fight on the scorecards and still lightweight champion Usman Nurmagomedov. There you guys go. Reminder, this is a fight card taking place in Dubai, so it's going to be an early card. I think prelims start around 10 a.m., maybe 11 a.m. Eastern time, so don't get caught napping if you want to catch this card in its entirety. And reminder, LFA going down the same night, so I will have breakdowns for the Legacy Warriors podcast, likely dropping on Friday, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And then also KSW going down Saturday morning. I'll only have written breakdowns for that on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. If you're looking for that, check the link in the description below. I've got my track plays already posted for PFL on the Lock of the Night Patreon page as well, so if you want to check that out, that's exactly where you guys can do it. All right, I will see you guys Friday for the LFA breakdowns. See you guys then. Peace.
Last thing.